This is such a lovely house, Emma. So much space for family, my mom said, dragging her suitcases through my front door without warning. My father followed behind with more luggage, nodding approvingly at my newly renovated living room. I stood frozen in my doorway, still in my work clothes, trying to process the scene before me. My name is Emma Cooper, and at 32, I had finally achieved my dream of owning a beautiful house in the suburbs after years of saving and hard work. Now, barely 3 months after moving in, my parents were apparently moving in too, without asking. Mom, Dad, what's going on? I managed to ask, watching as they started arranging their belongings in my living room. Oh, honey, Mom said, waving dismissively. We decided to sell our house. The market was too good to pass up, and we knew you had all this extra space. It's perfect. You sold your house. I felt my stomach drop. Without telling me you were planning to move in here. Why would we need to tell you? Dad chimed in, already settling into my favorite reading chair. You're our daughter. This is what family does. We take care of each other. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. But this is my house. I bought it with my own money. You can't just move in without asking. Mom's face shifted from cheerful to hurt in an instant. Are you saying you don't want your own parents living with you, after everything we've done for you? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you should have asked first. This is my space, my life. Your space? Dad's voice grew stern. We raised you better than this, Emma. Family comes first. Always. The next few days were a nightmare. My parents took over my house like it was their own, rearranging furniture, criticizing my decorating choices, and making comments about how I needed to grow up and appreciate family values. They claimed the master bedroom, my bedroom, saying they needed the attached bathroom for Dad's medical needs. I was relegated to the smaller guest room. My protests met with guilt trips and accusations of being selfish. We gave you everything growing up, Mom would say whenever I objected. This is how you repay us. A week later, I came home from work to find my kitchen completely reorganized. My healthy food replaced with their processed favorites, my carefully organized cabinets chaos. Mom, where are my meal prep containers? I asked, searching through unfamiliar arrangements. All those plastic things. I threw them out. They were cluttering up the space. You need to eat real food, dear. That was the last straw. This has to stop, I said firmly. This is my house, and you can't just take over like this. We need to talk about boundaries. Mom's eyes welled up with tears, her favorite tactic. Boundaries? With your own parents? I can't believe how ungrateful you've become. Dad stormed in, face red with anger. That's enough. We raised you, supported you, and this is how you treat us. Maybe you need to learn a lesson about respect. The next day, I came home to find the locks changed. My key wouldn't work. Through the window, I could see my parents sitting in my living room, acting like they owned the place. Mom opened the door just enough to speak. Until you learn to appreciate family, maybe you need some time to think about your attitude. Don't worry, we'll take good care of your house. The door closed in my face. I stood there, shock turning to cold anger. They had no idea what they'd just done. No idea at all. Instead of arguing, I smiled and walked away, pulling out my phone. I had prepared for something like this, though I never thought my own parents would be the reason. Hi, James, I said to my lawyer. Remember those documents we prepared? I think it's time to use them. My parents had no idea that I documented everything since the day they arrived. Every conversation recorded, every change photographed, every violation of my property noted. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about family. They were about to learn one about consequences. I checked into a hotel, still smiling. Sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate. It's carefully planned and perfectly executed. And I had a plan that would make them regret ever taking advantage of my kindness. Let them enjoy my house for now. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days after being locked out of my own house, I sat in James' office, reviewing the extensive documentation we gathered. Every text message, every photo, every bank statement proving my sole ownership of the property lay neatly organized in folders. Your parents really didn't think this through, James said, shaking his head. Breaking and entering, illegal eviction, theft of personal property. The list goes on. Have they tried contacting you? I showed him my phone, 47 missed calls and over 100 texts from my parents, ranging from angry demands to tearful guilt trips. Where are you staying? You're making us worry. Stop being childish and come home. After everything we've done for you. They still think they're in control, I said, putting my phone away. What's our next step? James smiled. The police have been notified. We've filed for an emergency eviction order. Given the evidence, the judge should rule in our favor quickly. True to his word, things moved fast. The next morning, my parents received their first shock. A formal notice from the court, delivered by a stern-faced officer. My phone exploded with messages. What is this legal nonsense? How dare you send the police to your own parents? We raised you better than this. I didn't respond. Let them stew in their self-righteous anger. Instead, I focused on phase 2 of my plan. While my parents were busy playing house, I'd been making calls. Remember those renovation projects they'd started without my permission? Turns out none of them were properly permitted. The city's housing department was very interested in that information. The inspector arrived unannounced, right in the middle of my dad's unauthorized bathroom remodel. The fines would be substantial. My brother Mark called that evening. Emma, what are you doing? Mom's hysterical. Dad's having blood pressure issues. Just let them stay. Like they let me stay. I asked calmly, in my own house that I paid for. But there are parents. Being parents doesn't give them the right to steal my home, Mark. They made their choice. Now they can face the consequences. The court date arrived faster than expected. I sat quietly in the courtroom, watching my parents' faces as their lawyer tried to spin their actions as a family misunderstanding. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, you illegally occupied your daughter's property, changed the locks without permission, and barred her from entering her own home. Do you understand the seriousness of these actions? But we're her parents. Mom protested, tears flowing. We gave her everything. Except respect, I muttered. The judge's ruling was clear. My parents had 48 hours to vacate the premises. Any damage to the property would result in additional penalties. And where are we supposed to go? Dad demanded as we left the courthouse. We sold our house because we trusted you. That's not my problem, I replied. You should have thought about that before stealing my home. The next day, watching from my hotel room, I received updates from my neighbors. My parents were moving out, but not quietly. They were taking my furniture, claiming it as theirs. Oh no, I smiled, dialing my phone. Hello, police? Yes, I'd like to report a theft in progress. The officers arrived just as my parents were loading my grandmother's antique dining set into a moving van. The set she had specifically left to me in her will. But we gave it to her. Mom wailed as the officers made them unload it. It's practically ours. Do you have documentation of that gift? The officer asked. They didn't, of course. I did, along with photos of every item in my house taken before they moved in. By evening they were gone, forced to move in with my brother Mark. My house, however, wasn't quite ready for my return. They'd left their mark in ways both petty and destructive. Walls painted in colors I hated, my personal items accidentally damaged, kitchen appliances mysteriously broken. But I'd anticipated this too. Remember those house photos I took for insurance when I first moved in? The ones documenting the perfect condition of everything before they arrived? My insurance company was very interested in those. As I stood in my damaged kitchen that evening surveying their handiwork, my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. I hope you're happy. Mom and Dad are devastated. This isn't what family does. I typed back a simple response. No, this is what consequences look like. Let them be devastated. Let them feel a fraction of the violation and helplessness they'd made me feel. Their actions had shown me exactly what kind of family they were. The kind that took without asking, demanded without giving, and expected without earning. But they taught me something valuable. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones you need to guard against the hardest. I started making calls to contractors. It was time to rebuild, not just my house, but my boundaries. And this time, they'd be stronger than ever. 6 months after the incident, as my brother Mark calls it, my house was finally restored. Not just to its original state, but better. Every change my parents had forced on my space was undone, replaced with choices that were uniquely mine. The insurance payout had been generous, covering not just the physical damage but also my hotel stays and legal fees. James, my lawyer, had made sure of that. I was enjoying my morning coffee in my newly renovated kitchen when the first letter arrived. My mother's handwriting, shaky but familiar. Dear Emma, Living with Mark has opened our eyes. We realize now that we may have overstepped. May have. I almost laughed. We miss you. Your father's health isn't good. The stress of everything. Perhaps we could talk. I set the letter aside, unmoved. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry it hadn't worked out the way they planned. A week later, Mark showed up at my door. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot on my porch. They're driving me crazy, he admitted. Mom reorganizes my kitchen daily. Dad criticizes everything. I think I understand now. Funny how perspective changes when it's your space being invaded. I replied, but I let him in. We sat in my new living room, the space now filled with warm colors and comfortable furniture that reflected my personality, not my mother's outdated tastes. They want to apologize, Mark said. Really apologize this time. Dad's pride took a huge hit when the neighbors found out what happened. Mom can't show her face at her book club anymore. Actions have consequences, I said, sipping my tea. They taught me that. But something had shifted. Mark's visit showed me that maybe, just maybe, my parents were finally learning their lesson. Not from guilt trips or emotional manipulation, their usual tools, but from experiencing exactly what they put me through. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. They looked smaller somehow, less imposing than the people who had bulldozed their way into my life half a year ago. Emma, Mom started, her voice lacking its usual dramatic flair. We were wrong. Dad nodded, looking at his coffee. We thought we had the right. Parents always know best. That's what we believed. But we didn't know best. We just knew what we wanted. You didn't just overstep, I said calmly. You tried to steal my home. You locked me out of the house I bought with my own money. You treated me like a child who had no rights to her own space. We know, Mom whispered. Living with Mark, it's different when you're the ones who have to follow someone else's rules. Mark's throwing us out, Dad admitted. Says we either need to respect boundaries or find somewhere else to live. We never taught our children about boundaries, did we? For the first time, I saw genuine regret in their eyes. Not just for getting caught, not just for facing consequences, but for the hurt they caused. We'd like to make it right, Mom said. We found an apartment, small, but it's ours. No more assuming we can take over our children's spaces. And we'd like to rebuild our relationship with you, Dad added. On your terms this time. I studied them carefully. The past 6 months had changed us all. They looked older, humbled. I felt stronger, more assured in my boundaries. It'll take time, I said finally, and things will be different. No more guilt trips, no more, but we're family excuses. They nodded, understanding that this was their last chance. Over the next few months, we started small. Sunday dinners, at restaurants not my house. Phone calls that respected normal boundaries. When they finally visited my home again, 3 months later, they asked permission first. They complimented my choices instead of criticizing them. They sat where I invited them to sit, used coasters without being asked, and left when I said it was time. Your house really is beautiful, Emma, Mom said during one visit, no hidden agenda in her voice. You've created something wonderful here. Yes, I agreed, looking around at my space, my choices, my life. I have. The lesson hadn't been easy for any of us. But sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important ones. My parents have learned about boundaries and respect. I had learned about standing my ground and the importance of protecting what's mine. Mark jokes now that I did him a favor. Nothing teaches you to value boundaries like having Mom and Dad as house guests, he says. As for me, my house is more than just a home now. It's a symbol of my strength, a reminder that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes the family you love needs to learn that lesson the hard way. My parents still have their moments, but now they catch themselves. They ask instead of assume. They respect instead of demand. And me? I'm finally at peace in my space, knowing that I not only created my dream home, but also protected it. Sometimes the happiest endings come not from forgetting the past, but from learning from it